Hi, I'm really excited about today. I sent out a MailChimp yesterday to everyone, and I noticed there are two things that I can't do. One is I can't write about what Janice and I are going to talk about today because we don't know. Things come to us, and there's this miracle of unity, a unity-based consciousness, which is how I want to start this morning. And the unity of the beauty, the majesty of a unity-based consciousness. Now, this is going to be bizarre for you to start listening to, unless you have a sense of it, because it sounds like an identity saying she has a unity-based consciousness. No, I'm saying that I'm with a group of people who have found themselves present to a unity-based consciousness and that are finding themselves engaging in this spectrum of consciousness like newbies, like beginners. And one of the things that happens with that is all of a sudden words are based in the past. They're based, like I said to Janice, I said, well, let's discuss the creative process, except there's all this database under the creative process that may not be accurate for how we're using the term. So that's the first thing I wanted to get said today. And the second thing is, I don't think it's everybody, but why Create a World was created? Because there is a world creating itself. And some of us are beginning to be in the spectrum of that. And how do you know it? How do you know you're in the spectrum of it? Because you are learning as you talk that you almost want to withhold speaking because you can tell how the words you're saying in you lay differently than the words that people are receiving out there. So clearly, if there are words inside of you that you want to use and you notice they lay inside of you in a different spectrum of consciousness, there is actually a consciousness there that you're present to. And we have this thingness world, so we think consciousness is a thing. No, it's an activity of the intelligence of creation. So that's the second thing I want to say. And then the third thing is that I realized I got a framework this morning that, because I've been figuring out why I have worked in the industry of service and contribution since I was 19 years old. So every time I say to myself, I no longer want to be in that framework, it sounds like I don't want to be of service and I don't want to contribute anymore. But that's not true. Remember the word thing I said before. But I couldn't get my head around what was it, because it's not the opposite of no, it's not no service or no contribution. Because to be born, for us to be alive, is a contribution. So you can't not contribute. And you can't not be of service. That would be like insane. But this morning, I was reading what Roxana, which I'm actually going to post on this particular Create a World YouTube TV show today. Afterwards, I'll post it. Because I think it's really important, because I get to play and involve my personal human life. They aren't separate anymore. In other words, the work is the human life now. And when we say self-expression, we mean the self of this new spectrum of consciousness of unity having a place, basically. And unity, we just have to be careful with that word because we haven't had it as a direct experience yet, as a constant, as a mental processing capacity. But I realize that's the gig, that I'm trying to shift everything I operate inside of to let's just create a world. Let's not fight the world we're in. Let's just create a world. And because the world we're in is collapsing, basically. And we have to pull our minds out of it. And we have to pull our thought processes out of it and literally be in new thinking. And be in new thinking related to words we've already used. And then ... we move into this phenomenon we call creative process, because it's a creative process of creating a world. And then it all framed for me this morning. So I felt like I did have something to say before I came on the call, that because writing doesn't get it for me yet. I think I'm just going to start doing short little Zoom clips, video clips, because the words don't lay out right when I try to write them. So I'd like to speak about Janice. Janice and I have known each other for a long time. The thing I've known about her is that in terms that work in any world, she's a visionary. And I've seen her suffer from holding on to something inside her that she could not let go of, and it would not let go of her. And I've seen this in other people whose lives I've been a part of, and including my own, and probably some of you watching this. And it's like a friend of ours, Sarah, said, I think it all has a place now. There's a song, I think I can make it now. It's actually one of the songs that we use in the Language of Consciousness Institute. We can see clearly now. We don't know what we're seeing, and we don't know how to articulate it, but the consciousness of it is rising in us. And I've seen Janice hold on for a long time, and will continue, because she can't not, basically. So I called her a couple of days ago, and I said, I just want to get together with you and be public and see what shows, because when we're having conversations, there's a depth of awakening and a depth of sorting consciousness, I guess you'd say, that I get stabilized by. And not because I'm unstable, but because there's a new, if you use homeostasis, we're in the process of a feedback loop that is the past, and a new feedback loop that is the future. And there is a constant facilitation of stabilization needed during that time, just to use big words for a minute. So I'm going to turn it over to Janice, whatever was on her mind this morning, which she texted a little bit to me. And then we're going to go from there. So over to you, Janice.
Yeah, so Tantra and I have both, we're both involved with the New Field Network, and which sort of its overall goal is to prepare people for coaching. But I really am understanding that it's really, I feel like, preparing people to be human beings. And I often say, being a human being is really the primary gig of our life, and yet we don't get any formal instruction in actually being a human being. We get instructions in like how to care for our physical body or how to interact, but in terms of actually being, like we don't get taught how to be, at least not in Western culture, which has been my experience. And so for me, part of the conversation that's been so powerful is this notion of being a beginner in learning. And so my background in terms of the work that I've done, I've been involved with the public schools pretty much my entire adult life. So we're talking 30 plus years now. I was a high school teacher. I worked as what was called an instructional coach, where I was helping other teachers work with their teaching practice. I now work with a lot of district leaders, trying to help them create the conditions in which better teaching can happen. And I've always, pretty much almost immediately after I started teaching, I started to describe myself as a teacher who didn't really like school, because I'm not a fan of the rigidity of the structures. And, I think that we saw really clearly when so many students were having to learn online from COVID, sort of when the rigidity of the structure fell apart, then sort of the learning fell apart. And parents were like, well, this can't be school, this can't be learning, this can't be teaching. And students were like that, and some teachers were like that. And it's like, but wait a minute. As human beings, we're programmed for learning. We're programmed for curiosity. I mean, that is part of the original nature of our original design. And I would argue it's probably one of the most powerful parts of the original nature of our original design. We're always checking things out. And so this idea of being a beginner in learning, a beginner with learning, or having conversations in our new field of work about what it looks like to reimagine learning, and in particular to sort of break it of some of that rigidity that I see in the public schools. And part of the vision that I hold is for schooling to really transform and to become a place where everybody who participates in the learning process is fed, right? And when you go into a classroom where learning is really happening, you see that dynamic. You see everybody's being fed. The students are being fed, the teachers are being fed, and it's this positive upward spiral. But we have a lot of things that are in the way of that purity. And I think part of what I hope will happen in the next few years is that we'll start to really look at schools as a system and say what's working and what isn't working. And, you know, what's not working is a lot. So there's a lot of change on the horizon if we decide to shift in a way that truly makes learning the joyful, nurturing experience it's supposed to be, right? And I used to have I had quotes all over hanging in my room, and one of them was, "There's no such thing as a finished education. Learning is not a spectator sport." Those were two of the ones that I used to use pretty regularly, right? Because, and again, when we're learning, like really learning about things that we love and things that we care about, it's very nurturing and energizing. And it's even, you hear a lot of people talk about, what it looks like to age well and continuing to stay connected to things that we're interested in as part of what keeps us vibrant, and the interest in even continuing to live, right? So I feel like a lot of what is birthing is people's desire to reconnect with that curiosity and that creativity, and creativity in the broad spectrum, right? Not like because that's the other thing that we've done with creativity is we put it in these boxes, right? Well, creativity means you're a writer, or it means you're a visual artist, or maybe you're a performer. It's like these little tiny boxes. Whereas in reality, taking an engine apart and rebuilding it is quite the creative act, right? So part of what we're needing to do is expand our understanding of learning, expand our understanding of creativity, and then be able to shift some of the things that's going on in our culture so that those things are supported rather than restricted. So that's my wish for the day, Tantra.
I also want you to know that your exclamation points is whatever your hand's hitting when it comes down on your table. So you have a little bit of a back drum roll going on here, which is great. So I want to comment on that. So, I think I am. Let's just give me a minute or a second. See, I'm the thing that I came up with, Janice, was what on earth are they talking about new learning? And I didn't realize till you talked that I just happen to have an insatiable curiosity, and that I just don't like to be hemmed in. I'm a color outside the lines person. And but I never associated that, frankly, till this minute, to learning. Duh. And so I really I'm like hooked in one of those thought things I talked about earlier. You say learning, I go, I don't even like to learn. Like I literally used to read my textbook. I have a high IQ, so that's why I could do this, everybody. It was no great shakes. I'd read the textbook for the test and pass the test, but I never listened to anything in school. Never. And I was doodling or wandering around thinking about trees or whatever I happened to be thinking about. But I had a what do you call it, a cheat sheet in my own head that let me get straight A's, but had nothing to do with learning. In fact, I don't remember a thing I learned in high school or any other class I had. But I remember my teachers, and my teachers did not extend to just my schooling, my proper schooling. It extended to who I met that helped me understand what I was. It extended to my recent doctors that helped me understand my body and helped me understand what I'm experiencing and giving it a place. And what I hear from what you said and how I can frame learning, trying to pull myself out of the past-based hook of I don't like learning, because I didn't like that learning. What I can get present to is the phenomenon of my own human beingness and how it doesn't want to die unfulfilled. I do want to lead a vital, exciting life. And I do want my mind to be available to that. And the other, of course, crisis is the fact that we're still suffering from the industrial age in Britain that set in place that learning was only to be functional. It was never to be creative. It was just to get your job done and then go home and recover. And that everything except function was just how it started to print out is now just go out drinking. Now just go get gratification, because tomorrow you may die in the coal mines or the 12-year-old children in the factory. So in Britain, so there's this undercurrent. And my youngest son, had the most brilliant conversation with me yesterday. He's 36 years old, and he is having, since he finished his job in Holland, he's moved to the States again. And he was saying to Mom, I just couldn't figure out all this worry that was tormenting me. And one of his friends, an Eastern young man from the East, that's part of the computer world that Aaron's an electrical engineering world that Aaron's part of, coached him or, talked to him. And he said, when it all goes down to the bottom, because my son does extreme sports, skiing mostly, and they're very physically vital. And he said, the truth is, Aaron, you're just concerned you're going to die, because that was put in place years ago in the Western society, that people don't realize children didn't even live till 20 years old that worked in the factories. I mean, this is inside a culture, a white culture. I know there are Black cultures and Asian cultures, but in the white culture, we have to get everything in before we die, because we could die any day. And I found it was so incredible that my son was in this conversation with this young man, his age, but Eastern. And so they don't have that background. They don't have that thought process of, and of course, the Black culture has slavery. You didn't know how long you'd last in the field before the overseer beat you to death or separated you from your family and sold you off. So this whole thing that Janice was speaking about Julio Odala, really what he's having us confront is who we are as a culture, not a secular culture outside of ourselves, but a culture of consciousness within ourselves. And how what we're really fighting, our system is fighting, is that internal culture. And all of us in the United States of America are immigrants. We're all immigrants. There's not one of us that started here unless you're native born or have native ancestry. And even those were actually immigrants, because they came across the isthmus of Russia, most of them, or they came from Spain and up to South America. And so it's really a cultural crisis, internal cultural crisis of, are we really going to die of our function? I know people that have gone into rehab when they retire because they don't have function anymore. I've seen men die that retire. They are looking forward to retiring, but their culture, even there, is embodied. And it's that you are useless without your function. So this whole idea of learning, I'm really glad this is how it showed up today, because I think the real commitment for me today, because I didn't know going in, is how do we have learning return as a vital unit of consciousness, and how do we bring to it an excitement, and you said a curiosity, simply because we really need to. It gets us human again. It gets us capable of being alive again. So thank you. And I'm still wrestling with it because I don't know how many people listening, but you have an adverse relationship to the system, but you're grounded in the word learning. That's real for you. I'm not grounded in the system, and I have a real issue with the word learning. And in the minute when I did my group, because Janice and I have a group we work with that's never done Julio's work, literally to share, not to teach, not to coach, but literally to share what we're learning. So we get it real. So we live it. So we're part of the living realm of it. And that we struggle with people's listening and our listening, and really go for a cultural breakthrough with our internal relationship to what has us be human. And what has us be human is that we're constant learners, not even new learners. We're constant learners. And I think that it's a sacred act to be cautious, and to be, what's the word I want? Cautious and I want to say respectful, but that's not the right word. Tender about what we're being asked to learn, because some of it ain't too good. Over to you, Janice.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear you describe that, Tantra. And so as I was thinking about this call, there were two stories that sort of popped up for me, and I think it illustrates learning as a vitality. So in my very first year of teaching, and anybody who's ever been a teacher knows that the first year is brutal, man. You are just in survival mode from day one till the end of the school year. And so I was driving to work one morning, and I realized I'm not a morning person. And so I would typically like plan my day at the end of the day, because I knew I wouldn't have the brain power in the morning. So I was driving to work, and I'm like, oh my God, I have nothing planned for, I don't. And some of my students were with me for 3 hours. So like to not have a plan for 3 hours was like not a good look. So I was driving, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna. And I happened to be in a classroom that had a ton of magazines. So I was teaching a veterinary science classroom, and the previous teacher had a subscription to like the Kennel Club or whatever. And so there were magazines everywhere. And so I was like, and it was nearing the end of the semester. So I was like, and I was teaching high school kids. That's important to understand. You're going to make collages of everything you've learned this semester. Right. And even as the words were coming out of my mouth, I'm like, oh man, this is no, they're going to look at me like, do you think we're in kindergarten? But they were thrilled, and they dove into it with such vigor and abandon, and they were having the time of their, I think I would, if I had let them do it all day, they would have done it all day. And it was really cool to see them create all of these and think about all the different ways they could express the things that they've learned. And it was like, wow, that to me, that's the power of the unscripted learning moment, where it's just being driven by curiosity and exploration, and let's see what we can figure out. And I mean, that day happened over 30 years ago at this point, and yet I can still remember it crystal clear, right? And then the other was I spent a year teaching at a juvenile detention center for girls right outside of inner city Baltimore. And this place that they were in was, whew, I mean, after being in the building for about 30 minutes, I said to one of my fellow teachers who I found out was also into some of the sort of alternative stuff that I was in. I was like, man, you could set a football field of sage on fire and it wouldn't be enough to clean the bad juju out of this place. And you know, some of the girls there they were in there for, you know, assault and like stealing cars. And I mean, you know, this wasn't just like shoplifting or whatever. And so they could be a pretty tough bunch. And in a facility like that, school has to happen all year round. So we were coming up on the summer, but they still had to go to school every day. And it's like, well, you know, we felt like we wanted to give them something a little bit different than the math and the. And this other teacher and I, we shared a trailer, by the way, that we taught in a trailer. We each taught in a half a trailer. To girls wearing traffic cone orange jumpsuits. They had changed the color of their jumpsuits because they were escaping at night and they needed them to be more vibrant. So I walked in one day and I'm like, oh my God, 20 girls in bright orange jumpsuits and half a trailer. I need to put my sunglasses on. So it was, I mean, it was a pretty kind of screwed up situation. But this other teacher and I, we had discovered a cabinet full of art supplies that had been locked up. And it turned out that at one point there was a floating art teacher that had, you know, traveled around the different juvenile facilities because the girls were separated. They were not in the same facility with the boys. But, you know, funding cuts, blah, blah, they'd stop that. So we're like, all right, well, can we do something with that? But then the people that were sort of in charge of the school were like, well, it has to fit into one of the official classes that's part of the Maryland state curriculum. Blah, blah. Okay. So the other teacher and I would go to the library, we spend an afternoon and we land on it. We're like, okay, we're going to offer a creative writing class and an art class because those are both part of the curriculum. And we're just going to do all this stuff. So, and again, I mean, these were girls that, you know, they got everywhere they went. They had to be chaperoned by, by basically sort of like pseudo cops who would, you know, break up the fights and things like that. And they would throw furniture and, you know, right. So the first day we bust out the paint, right? And we bust out the paint and the art supplies. And I mean, and they're painting on these tiny little desks in this half a trailer. And this hush falls over the room. I mean, this absolute silence, this absolute stillness. And they just were pouring every bit of themselves into this creative process. And when the sort of with the rent-a-cops, because they would drop the kids off for school and then they would come back and pick them up. So when they came back at the end of the day and they walked in and they're looking around, they're like, what did you do? You know, I mean, they couldn't believe the difference. And it was like, we just gave them a vehicle to express everything that has been roiling inside of them. I mean, you don't find yourself at 15 years old in a juvenile detention facility unless there's been some things going down in your life, man. And you know, they did group therapy, but there's something very different about talking about stuff and just actually being allowed to let your body go and pour, you know, and let the emotion flow through the body into this artwork. And then after that, they wanted to paint every day. It was just, I mean, again, this incident probably has been 20 years ago, but I can still hear the complete silence in my brain because it was just so palpable. And it's like, you know, all we did really was get all of the crap out of the way and let them be. They were being allowed to be with everything that they were. And then we dovetailed that into some creative writing and, you know, they wrote letters to themselves, they wrote letters to the people in their life. And it was just so profound. But it was because of the way we sort of stripped away all of the expected programming of school. And arguably, I can't imagine anything more important for those young women in that situation to learn than how to connect with themselves, right? I mean, they found themselves where they were because they had lost connection to themselves. You don't wind up in a juvenile detention facility if you are in touch with who you really are as a human being. So, that arguably was the most critical learning they could do. Even though they were 15 or 14 and still technically we're supposed to be learning algebra and, stuff like that. But so to me, when you are truly in that creative learning space, the vitality is undeniable. You couldn't stop that flow of vital energy if you tried.
Thanks. I'm gonna stretch a minute. So because we're in this body of work together, I wanted to correct something you said.
Okay,
You
good.
said you still hear it in your brain. I think you still feel it in your body.
Mm.
And that's part of it we're
Mhm.
learning, that
Yeah.
we're beginning to learn that the memory of pleasantness, the memory of miracles, the memory of these moments that go outside the lines, that our body retains it. And I made notes because we really don't want to be authorities in this conversation. And yes, we are authorities in some conversations if that's our role. But we really are new learners. Janice and I mean, it makes me cry because somehow that opened up a wellspring. We're in a wellspring of something we've been pushing for. And the beauty of meeting Julio is the door opened and the floodgates opened. And now we're just sort of beside ourselves about it, and at the same time being as responsible as possible for making sure it's something we're living. It's not something we categorized and boxed to then deliver to you for you then to get a how-to book out of it. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So that's one of the distinctions I'm learning. It's why I said that to Janice. What happened for me is that I had polio, and I also had a very bad car wreck where I was paralyzed from the waist down for about 6 months. So I've never been able to run. I'd literally never be able to run. And there was this dynamic in the work of moving the body, but we weren't, for speaking for myself, I was in it with 7 others that we've been in close contact for a while now. And there's a coherence among us that allows for something that when that coherence, that strangers in the night, doesn't allow for. And I was out walking my daughter's dog, and I was listening to salsa music that my daughter had sent me because they had you do salsa to get yourself back in your body, because the body's the ultimate learner. The body is the ultimate learner. And that's the thing that I've gotten out of this. The things that had me survive is not my psychology. The things that had me survive, it was my body was capable of taking on, and what my body was capable of surviving, and what my body was capable of expressing. And that's been the biggest thing for me. And how to translate that, because that's what Janice did with those girls. Their bodies were on the floor or on the desk, doing something their bodies never did before. Their bodies were used to fighting, protecting, cowering, cowling, threatening, but their bodies were in the body's self-expression because they were moving their hands and their eyes were picking out colors. And this is the thing in factories, and the thing in present learning is the body's ignored. And my children, Aaron and Liana, 2 of them, first of all, my daughter wasn't going to make it in school. The principal called me in her 6th grade and told her that I needed to do something. My daughter's is entirely too alive. That was a clue. So I pulled her out of school instantly. And my other child, Aaron, was more social, so he didn't really care. And but she wore combat boots and evening gowns and whatever color or configuration of hair that she wanted to have at that moment. So you can see that she didn't quite fit in a rural public school very well. But I found this school in Canada. It was called the Shepherd's School. It was not religious. And basically they interviewed the parents to make sure that they would teach your kid. In other words, the parent was the problem, not the child. And what they told me was that in Ohio, there was 16 hours a month that was required of actual, the data of learning, arithmetic, the data. And they said, but we only give them those 16 hours that they have to meet the credentials, and the rest is their self-expression. And I was like, holy mother. And they have our phone 24/7. And they start their projects, and we have certain dates we check in with them, or they can call us anytime. Well, it was amazing. It was the most amazing experience of my life. And then Aaron took it on because he thought, well, Liana gets all that time off. Why can't I have that time off? That was his logic. But I'll never forget it as long as I live, because when my daughter did go to school, to college, she didn't want to go. We took her to Evergreen, which is where you design your own diploma. And she never thought she'd learned. She actually thought she was still dysfunctional in learning. It makes me cry. And the day she graduated, she did it because she wanted to be able to have a degree so she could write, what do you call it when you get money for something, whatever. Grants. So she could write grants. She had to have a degree to write grants. And 5 teachers showed up at her graduation to tell her that she was the best learner they'd ever met. And they really wanted her to get the power of her ability to self-learn. And so that's the other thing. But I took notes. And one of the reasons I took notes is that we have to remember we're mentally wired to fit with our society. So as Janice talked, I took notes because my mind will lose it. It will lose what I heard her say that I wanted to respond to, because the wiring is not geared to go that way, literally. So the first one I said, and the other thing I said is our present adult learning is often learning to either survive our world or how to recover our body, our health, or how to recover a job. There's almost no learning to recover a self. And most learning to recover a self is considered spiritual, which is crazy. I've met just as many people in the spiritual world, which obviously you all relate to me there, that are not functional as if I have in the secular world with people desperately trying to function. It's across the board. Nobody gets out of this one. And then and the question I want to bring forward, not to answer, just to give us a place to kind of sort of stick, the machinery goes like this, and you take that stick and you jam it in just so it can't make its full turn anymore, like that thing. And what would it be like to recover the beauty of learning that has nothing to do with what we have to do or what we have to recover from? And feel your body when I say that, all of us, including Janice and I, there's kind of a fear. There's we have years of ostracization for artists, the parent that says you can't go into art, it doesn't make money. Creative self-expression, yeah, but where are you going to sell it? And that's not functional. So we're moving. We're going back and reclaiming the essence of being human in a very functional way, which is to do what we love, give our bodies some time off to just express, like that day in the middle of walking Kevin, I ran, my body ran, I didn't run, my body ran. And guess what? It still does. So this one I want to drive home, and hopefully we can have more conversations about this. We do not realize body first, mind second. We think it's mind first, body second, but it's not. Because I've watched people work their whole life to think better, to work better, to be more productive, but their body is traumatized because the bodies had no self-expression. the body has had no freedom to be. The body has not had time off. So I want to put that in. And then I was thinking to what you said, Janice, and the last note I had is that I have been, I'm a channel, and I'm a seer, and I'm a prophetess, and and I really am those things. I have lots of history now to claim it authentically. And I always had this question about myself, like, how come I did recover from terminal illness? And I kept and how come I had a very physically traumatic young life, and yet something in me knew to stay in touch with the beauty, not me, but stay in touch what gave me life and had me feel whole, not tried to go back and figure out the source of the trauma. Everything in me knew if I went back to try to figure out the source of the trauma, I would be down for the count. I would be in it forever. And I just couldn't do it. But I've always, somehow being spiritual seemed the antidote to something, but not the core value, not the core of what it was. And what I now realize in all the years of saying, I'm here for us to recover ourselves, I realize that our self is our humanity. Our self is our everyday world. Our self is getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, not in service to others, but in service to self, in service to the beauty of life itself. And the only place that beauty of life can live is in you and in me and in Janice. And that, where do we go to look? We go to look with what really matters to us. And a lot of us have become so terrified by the society we were born into that we are even scared to go look and risk including in our day what matters to us, even for a minute, because somehow it's socially incorrect. Just anything for you, Janice.
Yeah, especially to that last point, Tantra. And I think because so we were having a conversation on one of the follow-up classes that we've done, and people were talking about how hard it was for them to re-enter their sort of regular, typical working day after having spent, 7 days over 2 weeks doing the new field work, because there was such a stark, energetic comparison between, for me, I know it's mostly between the quality of conversations happening in one place versus happening in the other. And I think that's the other thing that stops us, Tantra, is that when we get a taste of that which connects us to life and has us exist as whole, it's so sweet. I think it makes us realize how much not that is, our 16 waking hours are made of. And so it takes courage to dip your toe back into what is life enhancing. Because you're generally not going to be supported by the culture around you. And that culture, right, is in every person that's in our life. And so we frequently have people who love us, right? They love us, and yet they're the first ones to say, well, you can't do that, or you can't do that, or you can't do that, because, and they're truly saying it out of love, but they're saying it through the programming of this culture that's not about life enhancement. So it's that when we do this life enhancing thing, that we're going to get that feedback, but that also, again, it's going to give us a glimpse of what is possible. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to move towards that possibility, right? I mean, what of the safe containers of our lives are we willing to give up to move towards what's really going to feed our souls?
And slow and easy wins the race. The culture of the field of Tantra Maat, and Janice has been part of that, and I've been part of that, really heavy duty for about 8 years. And so it's fascinating to know, like, I'll give you a prime example. We deal a lot in everything we're talking about. We deal both individually in our own lives, but collectively is, how do we create a safe container, an energetic container that give that whole feel that you start to get that it's safe to step out because you're being held by a coherent field or a group of people that are operating on behalf of the inquiry of what is life enhancing and life generating. And it's in the inquiry, it's not in the function, it's not in the doing, it's in the curiosity. And out of that, the body seems to respond, the mind seems to respond, and the emotions seem to respond in a kind of, we call it strength, stamina, capacity. And so the reason Create a World is going on is that this is our next version. Although we're doing it as kind of a we, we just want to, we want the belonging to be to you, yourself, not to us or not to our method or not to our conversations or not just to you. And we really struggled with how to pull it off. And we're still struggling with how to pull this off. Janice is struggling to how do you pull off an environment with people, whether it's parents or students or teachers, that allows for an environment to occur that allows us all to be learning at the same time, because something's rising in our consciousness, something we've never experienced before, something that's actually new. And I have clearly closed the door on the formality of service and contribution, knowing that to be human is to be a contribution and a service. And really moving towards what would be the frameworks that would allow for us to be in the joy and excitement and pleasure of creating a world coming from a whole new place and learning as we go. Learning by Janie, she was one of the most top healers we ever had in Sanctuary, which was an old body of work I did. And I always remember this. She was so amazing. She actually shopped for commercial products for Indian reservations. And she was feisty. Oh my goodness. She looked like a little pit bull. And she did a reading with me. This is like 40 years ago. And I said to her, you ought to go explore healing, which she had no concept of, except there was just something present about her. Well, she comes back 2 years later. She done 500 courses on healing. That's what I mean, a pit bull. And she discovered she had an innate capacity to heal very bad cancer, actually, really bad cancer, to the point that the Dalai Lama invited her to be the only non-Tibetan monk to come with the Tibetan monks to study rare herbs in the Himalayas. That's how far she went. And that's an example. She had no concept. She just got curious about what I said, went and explored it, and a whole world opened up for her that wasn't even on the docket. Wasn't even on the docket. The other thing she got to do is, because she had this other thing, when the Dalai Lama sent supplies to Siberia when they were in trouble, she got to ride in the back of the transport plane on the boxes to deliver the supplies. So the reason I'm saying this, she ended up with this amazing adventurous life that all came out of just taking a minute to learn something that some crazy psychic said to her out of the blue. And as she took it on, a whole world opened up that was never there before. So this is the Janie quote. She said, well, she also liked to go bar hopping at night. She was very colorful. She came home one night and we said, Janie, who are you? And she said, well, I'm a bricklayer, because I figured out a long time ago that you got to take the path. But the only way you can really take the path is to constantly put the brick down in front of you. So you could say that what we're doing here today and what we're doing every time we meet is we're just trying to put the brick down in front of us, and we know there's a path. We know something's opening up. We know something's happening. But these 1 hour times for us to get together is we're just putting the brick down in front of us and seeing where it goes and seeing where it takes us. And that's as far as we can go. Anything for you, Janice?
And so I had a colleague who used to use this metaphor. She'd say it's like walking with a flashlight, because a flashlight's only going to show you a couple feet ahead of you, but you take a few more steps and you see a few more feet. And that's, yeah. So And that's, I think, then where this idea of being able to sort of detach from the outcome or detach from the results is so critical. I mean, I often say in my sort of my work world, we are educating children for, jobs that don't even exist yet. We don't even know what the jobs are they're going to have when they're adults. But I feel like that's true for us, even as we're figuring out how to be human beings, right? Because we don't even know what being a human being is going to look like in 20 years. I mean, I know I have cravings for what it looks like in 20 years, but we just don't know. Which then also, to me, puts the clarity on why we have to talk about living in the present and be here now, and that really is all we have. And I realize in some circles it's sort of treated a little bit like a hackneyed cliche, but that is the thing, right? We have this moment right now, and and then looking for the ways. And I feel like this is part of what we're going to continue to learn from Julio in the Newfield Network is what is it like to shape the container that you're in right now, and how can you use your body and your emotion and your language to create a container that is supportive of you, even when you're having to maybe deal with some things that are not life enhancing, right? Because we're all going to have to continue to deal with things that aren't life enhancing, but it's how can we sort of mold how the support structure that we put around us, that it can feed us while we're doing the challenging stuff, so that there's still us when we have the opportunity to do things that feed us.
Beautiful. I want to I want to try to frame, and then Janice, jump in if you can clean up the framing. One is that I'm absolutely positive, which is the other reason I started Create a World, or we started Create a World, a bunch of us, is I'm actually certain that how the new framework of doing is going to occur is it grows like a seed that we don't know the name of. And so I've always been brilliant at matrices, structures in time, and how to develop people into reaching a certain goal. That's down the tube. That ain't going to happen, because whatever's framing now is bringing in huge. That's why culture, our internal culture, matters so much. It's actually good news, not bad news. It means all the culture of consciousness of human being is up. That means we can be a new culture together, undefined by other things that we were stuck in as individuated or tribal or ethnic or familiar or historic. So we really are on the edge of something awesome, just awesome. So this navigating of how to be people together in it is really eerie and really fun. Like, how do we just be people together in this thing? And so a couple of things I want to put in, but you have to know we don't know. If you can just live in that, there's a bunch of us that create a world together. And we only use my name as a tagline because I had the most public presence, which is all going to be fixed now. But the point is that I found out I have a Gmail, which I didn't know. The person that put all this together, I didn't realize that it came with a Gmail. That would just flip me out. And a letter, which is extraordinary, which I'm going to post, where she took all of the interviews she had with all of us and made it into a document that's just bloody awesome. And it just basically says everything, which is amazing when you have someone else put words to something you can barely get out of your own mouth. So as a collective group of people. But anyway, I realized that I'll Christina, or I'll put it on the YouTube channel, but we don't know what we're doing. We're not like, we don't have things in place for you that, the new system of promotion We now have something in place for you to buy or you to come participate in. We don't have that. But if something is fascinating about what you've heard and you want to write, it's create a world program at gmail.com. And if you just want to write and say, I'm curious, we're going to keep all the emails and we're going to, and we'll look at them. And if something springs up and Janice says, yeah, let me just set up a time to talk. Let's just talk, teacher, students, let's just talk. Let's see what comes of it. We have that available. You can go back and look at the other YouTube's Creative Worlds. And now that I know I have this Gmail account, if there's anything of interest to you or anybody you want to connect with, just in one of the talks, just let us know. And honest to God, this is one of the things we didn't mention today, but the whole in the world, in the Language of Consciousness Institute and the work of Tantra Maat, we really do have the observer as primary. Observer, to be able to observe something, to be able to be present to something, to be able to open up into something. And in that, there's a different kind of having. There's just a different kind of having. Same with being. Observing being has us be present to being beyond what we've known before, and being present to being what we've never known ourselves to be before. We open up into something that we find ourselves being that we wouldn't have, like Janie, would have been unfathomable to her when she was busy doing supplies for the Indian reservations. And she's so glad I said that. She's dead now, but I'm sure she's listening. It's another brick and for her. And so I just want you to know that. And because I believe with all my heart, the formation of money, the formation of doing, the formation of service and contribution, the doing part of it is going to come through conversations that rise with the times, conversations that come with the consciousness that's rising, just like therapy answered a problem. Everything solves something that's up in the times, and there's new times now. And those new times, it doesn't matter our age. I'm 76. And there's something rising in the times that if we just, like Newfield's a brilliant, it's a shame it's just a coaching thing. But I know that's why we're doing it, because we can use it in our own work powerfully and mature this deep level of being that we were missing. We had the language down. We did the language capacity down. We did not have the somatics down. And we did not have the emotional component down. And it's just a privilege to be in the life university idea that Julio and his beautiful daughter and coaches have provided for us and for all of us. So that's the one thing I want to say. And then the other thing I want to say is there were 8 of us that did this work. And we have to have groups. And I have my group, and Janice may have hers. But if you're interested, there's 5 separate meetings. We're just sharing the information. We're just sharing what we're learning. But if you're interested, write create a world program at gmail.com. And we have 7 of us, and some of us haven't gotten all our groups together yet. And I think it's because there's something about what's rising in the field. I mean, literally what's rising in the field, which is a very different concept than, I gotta, what is it called? Fill the numbers. I gotta fill the, what's it called?
The quota.
Yeah, I've got to fill the quota. Thank you. So that's what I want to offer. And then I'm going to actually turn it over to Janice for final words. And we've been busy with you creating a world, and it's been lovely. Over to you, Janice.
To me, it's just really exciting. Tantra and I have had the conversation for years that it's, well, it's not quite here yet. It's not quite time. And now it's here, and now it's time. And there really is opportunity for all of us to step into that which just gives us life, and imagine a world where people who are, dripping with life are the ones that are running around on the planet. I mean, that I had said to somebody recently that part of why I still hang in here on this planet is because I just have such a love for and a fascination with human capacity. And I really do believe that human capacity is infinite. We're just scratching the surface of all the miraculous things that we can do when we are connected to each other. We're connected to that which feeds us. So I'm really excited about what's coming.
Yeah, it's why Janice and I hung all these years, where our love for the strength, stamina, capacity of human being and the unique and essential self-expression that each human being is, had us ride some pretty heavy duty, rough waves, right, honey?
Mhm, mhm.
All right, thank you all. Whatever forms is coming from the formless into form now, and whatever's falling apart just will. And I just think it's a great idea for some of us to get together and be in a forming while in seeing what forms while other things go out of existence.